Welcome to the Entrepreneur Gene. I'm your host, Laurie Barkman. Each week, we'll hear from founders and CEOs to explore key decisions they've made for growth, value creation, and challenges along the way. This show is sponsored by the Business Transition Sherpa, offering entrepreneur advisory services from transition to transaction. Don't forget to hit subscribe, follow us for the latest episodes, and visit thebusinesstransitionsherpa.com for more exclusive content. Let's dive in. Today on the Entrepreneur Gene, I am joined by someone I can honestly say I wish I knew earlier in my career when I was leading marketing teams. He's an expert at knowing the latest trends in sales and marketing to help us take out the complexity in our marketing stack. He's got a particular focus on demand generation and helping businesses create powerful leads. He's a strategist who has helped transform more than 200 companies. That's amazing. And welcome to the stage, CEO and founder of Measured Results Marketing, Christopher Antonopoulos. Welcome.
Thanks for having me today. I'm quite excited about this topic and had lots of debates with my son this week. So I'll share not only my impressions, but also some of the things that he said contrary to what I believe. Go figure.
Oh,
Go figure. Those 11-year-olds.
there's some intrigue here. I love that. Well, let's start. Let's get started. Out of the gates, Christopher, is there an entrepreneur gene, and what does it mean to you?
So I think there is, and I look at it as propensity. So I think there's some genetic makeup that gives you a propensity to do something. So yeah, I'll share I'm neurodivergent, I'm dyslexic, and I'd like to think that that gives me some sort of entrepreneurial gene based on having to figure things out or look at the world differently. And then it depends on, after that, it really depends on the environment you're in. So if your family has run a business or the people you're around, it sort of piques that interest and allows you to become an entrepreneur. But I think that a lot of it is genetic, and then it's a matter of using that propensity. The other thing that I argued with my son about was, even if you don't have a propensity to do something, maybe you can learn it, but you may not be particularly good. And so we had some real interesting debates around that. So I've been trying to teach myself how to play an acoustic guitar, which is over there. It's on a stand, so I see it every day. I can play a few chords. I can do that, but I don't fancy myself that I'm ever going to be really good at that. So I think you need the genetic for the propensity and the genetics to be particularly good. I think anyone can be trained to a certain point, but are they going to get to sort of, achieving what they want to or be really entrepreneurial? Like my neighbor's son is a good goalie as an elementary school child, but he's only going to grow to be 5'2" tall. And so as good as he is, as well as he understands the game, if someone kicks the ball in the upper right-hand corner, he's not going to be able to get it regardless of, how athletic he is or how smart he is, and then has learned that. So I feel it's the same thing with entrepreneurship, that you've got a propensity genetically to do it. Is that coming out with nurturing or not? And then it determines, I think the genetics determines how good you can be at that, not whether or not you're an entrepreneur or not an entrepreneur.
Yeah, let's build on that. I think this is a really interesting notion. Propensity to drive you to take the chance or to drive you to do something. As we think about some of those attributes as an entrepreneur, and maybe, as you said, we're learning them, right? Or maybe we've already got kind of an innate skill. What's the top 5 list?
So in terms of propensity or a propensity to be entrepreneur, I think, a lot of it is really, I listen to some of your other podcasts, and I think for me, it's part of it is confidence. I think having that, be confident, self-assured, that's necessary, whether you're introverted or extroverted, just that confidence or ability to, take that risk. I think the second thing is, it was talked about as being a maverick or some of those pieces, but seeing the world differently, or um, being able to do something that most people think is difficult or impossible. So it's that sort of curiosity, sort of that ability to look at things and say, everyone is doing it this one way. Maybe we should look at it a different way. And I think, for me being dyslexic, that is particularly helpful because every time I look at something, it's almost a new problem. So I'm trying to figure it out or do those pieces. The the ability to be stubborn. And I know that might be a little bit controversial, but beyond confidence is sort of not taking no for an answer. If you understand sort of what you want to do, it's sort of stopping at that point and saying, all right, you know, I'm being told no, I'm being told this doesn't make sense, but I know that there's an answer and I'm going to continue to drive toward that answer regardless of what the outside world is. And then I don't really have a fifth thing, but being okay with failing or not being perfect. I think some of the entrepreneurs or individuals that wanted to go down that path that were perfectionists, that wanted to get, every last thing right, or, needed a lot of information before they could make a decision, didn't make it very far. So maybe a better way to say this is ambiguity, that you're okay with ambiguity and not knowing the answers, but confident that you're going in the right direction.
There's so many things I agree with. And this question is not to disagree, but just to add on.
Yeah.
What about the ability to be wrong? If we're stubborn and we're digging in and we don't want to take no because we inherently know we're right, at what point do entrepreneurs say, wait a minute, maybe I'm not right?
I think when you fail enough times with that thing, like you have to have that experience. It's kind of funny. It's sort of, yeah, I'll talk about my son a lot, but I tell him, it's 9 degrees outside. You need to put your jacket on. No, no, dad, I'm not cold. And so he does that once and like, oh, I'm fine. And I see him with blue nails and shivering. And, he does it again. And he's like, well, now he asks me what temperature it is outside and then makes a decision on a jacket. I think the stubbornness is sort of to a point when you realize that it's not successful or it's not going to work and you need to switch direction, and maybe that's that fixed one, which is being sort of self-aware or humble enough to know that I am confident in this, but reading the tea leaves, understanding the world around you and saying, I believe this is correct, but now I have enough evidence that it's, even though I may be right, the world may not be ready for it, and so I need to pivot if we're going to be successful. But I agree with you. It's a really hard line when you look at people who are visionaries and say, um, probably an example is like the Internet of Things 4 years ago. That was the big thing. Everything is going to be connected to the internet. Your toothbrush, your refrigerator, your washer and dryer, your barbecue grill. And lots of people sort of put lots of effort behind it, and it really hasn't played out that way. And so the entrepreneurs are ones to figure out, I've taken it as far as it can go. Maybe it's time to change, and maybe not be too stubborn. Then I'll sort of revise what I said a little bit.
Do you think that we can teach entrepreneurship?
I think you can. I think it can be taught as long as someone has the propensity or curiosity or those pieces to do it. Um, you can teach anything. I think it's whether someone is going to get good at entrepreneurship and really want to do it.
If you were going to create a class, what would you focus on?
Um, Dealing with ambiguity and uncertainty and making decisions without all the information you have. They never ever teach you that. You have all of these brilliant case studies that give you all of the facts that you need. There are, here is the balance sheet, here is the revenue. If there are this many customers paying this amount, like, it's very neat. I'd almost want to start a class to talk about sort of the unneat, undifficult things and train that. Like, how do you deal with not knowing whether a deal is going to close and you have enough revenue to support the entire team of employees and contractors? What happens when you don't know XYZ? What happens if something like COVID, where you don't have an office, everything is closed down, no one wants to see anyone? Like, how do you deal with those difficult situations? And I think that's what my class, if I was doing a class on entrepreneurship, I would focus on those things they don't tell you that you need to be able to figure out, rather than some of all of the financial, managerial, accounting, knowing how to hire and fire and what are the right team members, building culture. Like, those fundamentals are important. But I think dealing with ambiguity and knowing when to make a decision or not is how I would focus.
I totally agree with you on that. And it's interesting. You're the first person that's brought up the ability to deal with ambiguity as a success trait of an entrepreneur. And I can totally relate to that. And when I wasn't an entrepreneur and I was an intrapreneur, the lead of the marketing team who's trying to help do things different, better, faster, smarter, profitable, that kind of role, and thinking about how we can do things differently. And at the time when there were a lot of new marketing tools to try and there was no proven path, I was leaning in on that, right? It was very ambiguous, but hey, let's try it. Let's see what happens. And I think that's a trait not only for that role in marketing, but I think also for sure as a general manager, as a CEO, we have to lean in on things we don't already have a path for. And as an entrepreneur to be successful, super, super important. I so appreciate you saying that. In your business and some of the challenges that you're facing every day, what are some of the things that are most keeping you up at night?
I mean, I think the today it's what do you focus on, or what are your big bets keep me up at night? So there's, you know, is AI just like the Internet of Things, or is it like the internet or computers or those pieces? And so a lot of what keeps me up is, what direction should I go, or where should we go all in? Are we all in with AI for generating content or helping with sales process? Lots of sort of opinions, and you have a direction there, but it's that choosing the direction when there are so many choices is the thing that keeps me up at night. I'm confident enough in myself and in the team that we're able to figure it out. So regardless what happens in the economic environment, what happens with technology, what happens with companies, we have enough experience to say, all right, things are not working out the way we expect it to. Here are some things that we can try in that circumstance. The hard part is saying, I'm going to invest time and dollars and people resources into figuring something out that may or may not ultimately help our clients or translate into revenue for the business. So those are the things. And then it's always is there something that is there some important piece of data out there that I've missed and not looked at that's going to come bite me at some point? And maybe that's just me. I don't, I hope it's not, but it's sort of that, is there something else I need to pay attention to that I'm not at the moment? And how do I figure that out before something changes, fabulously or fantastically from a client or market perspective?
That is always a really hard challenge. We're focused on what we can control most times. Let's say maybe that's 80% of our hands and brain, kind of working in that direction. Then 20% is trying to control what we can't control. We're looking out ahead saying, what's happening? What are my competitors doing? What are some of the dynamics happening in the marketplace that hopefully we're not playing catch up, but we're kind of not the leading either, right? If we're not cutting edge, we're fast followers, whatever that strategy is for the business. So there's no one answer there. That's why I'm kind of giving all of them. But that realization that we don't have all the answers, but as a CEO, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, got to kind of be looking in the, through the windshield as opposed to always through the rear view. And yeah, totally. I think that's a challenge that many others are facing as
I mean,
well.
how do you understand all this stuff? I mean, that's the yeah, I'm sure like me, you're bombarded with all sorts of messages and ideas and thoughts, and give me 15 minutes of your time and I can solve this really big challenge. And I mean, the big learning for me there is really leaning on your team, leaning on your network, leaning on your colleagues, because someone's going to be really, really passionate about one of these topics and dug in and be thoughtful about it. And you don't have the capacity to be thoughtful in all of these different areas. You can only choose two or three at any given time, but it's really finding the right people that are passionate about these things that you are interested in. And then hopefully they can identify some of the blind spots for you. Like, did you know XYZ is coming? This change in legislation is a great example. So they have the changes in wages, minimum wage for highly compensated and middle compensated employees. I would have not known that had I not been connected to sort of a group that follows that. That would have just passed me by, and it would have had no understanding or clue that that was happening.
Yeah, I love the idea of having networks that you're a part of. Are you a member of any member organization that you want to give a shout out to?
Lots of different ones. I would say that I built my own sort of network. I don't think there's one. I mean, there's, where I am, I'm in Northern Virginia. So the Northern Virginia Tech Council is particularly good for, some of those changes. There's like Potomac Tech Wire and some of those groups. And then, um, yeah, I've also found lots of people who are just wicked smart and interesting and follow some of these pieces. And so I have almost a mini checklist of if I want to know the latest or greatest in AI and agents and being on the bleeding edge, Sean on my team is a person I call. If I have a question about finance, I'm calling Keith because he's following all the legislation around these pieces. So I wish there was a group that had that or could be formed that had all of those different disciplines, but um, I rely on sort of individuals in some of those groups to get those answers because there's no way that you can find those answers, and if you don't get them, there's lots of blind spots you'll never think of.
Yeah, it's sort of conceptually, I think about it as reverse mentoring,
Yeah,
particularly when you have, um, I want to say it's not always a younger person on the team, but sometimes it
yeah,
is, and they're just looking at the world through a different lens than we are. When I was in the earlier days of digital marketing, and there were people who knew a ton more about some of the marketing stack elements than I knew, I said, "Hey, let me take you to lunch. Teach me, tell me about what you're
yeah.
looking at and sort of the trending on the IT side and how we can do our jobs better, faster, et cetera." And I've sort of carried that idea through. We can always learn from the people who are with us. We can learn from the people who we trust as advisors. Some companies, as they get larger, start to bring in outside independent views more formally too, right? An
Mm.
advisory board. Sometimes we form client advisory boards. I've served on some of those for large software companies. And it's amazing, right? Because when they bring together clients, in that setting, they're learning so much about, well, how are the clients looking ahead at some of these
Yeah.
challenges and what opportunities. So again, I think the encouragement is try to take a 360 view inside, outside, and then maybe even folks that are not in your industry and understanding what they're so that's a lot for a leader. Kind of speaks to, gee, how do we spend our time, right? And what are the things where we should be spending time? It's not an easy thing to figure out.
And then when do you pause? Like, so I block off white space. So my best ideas usually come in the morning when I'm taking the dog around the neighborhood and those bits. But the other thing that I learned, and this was when I was at Tanberg, they called it white space. So we were required to do a 2-hour block a couple times a week on our calendars. Like nothing, no meetings, no anything. And you're encouraged to literally go outside of the office and walk around the office or take a long lunch or whatever else. And it took, I had problems dealing with that at first. So, like, I'm not being productive. I'm paid to do this job. I'm not in a meeting. That means I'm not busy. And I think the other part too is to sort of take some time to pause and digest. And that's just as important as all that other time. Um, that's when the ideas come. That's when you sort of pull all these pieces together. But, you know, everyone has some sort of value or something to share. And at least for me, you don't know what the value or importance of that is. Um, a lot of times not until sort of much later.
Very true. Very true. You've hinted a bit at technologies that are exciting and also kind of a quandary to figure out, right? And the
Um,
opportunity, whether it's IoT, whether it's AI. And so I want to talk a little bit more about the future. As you see the future of the marketing automation industry, what's exciting to you about it?
I'm excited that a lot of these tools are trying to pull together all sorts of disparate information into one platform or one view. Like, it's pretty exciting, the concept of really understanding a customer from, the 360 view of the customer and those pieces. So, you know, how do they engage with you? What did they buy from you? Like, what is your business relationship in those pieces? And then what is the stuff that you put out there from a marketing perspective that they've interacted with? And then what is someone interested in beyond that? And the exciting part for me is pulling all of those pieces together and, being able to have a legitimate relationship with someone based on knowing a lot more about what their needs, interests are, from a business motivation perspective as well as personally, and getting all of those bits together. Like that's pretty exciting just to have a much better view of those pieces. Um, I'm cautiously optimistic that it's going to be easier to find answers to stuff going forward. Like, I really, AI is not there yet. You have to build prompts, and, you know, only probably one or two times out of 10 do I actually get the answer to the question that I am asking, not sort of something irrelevant. But the idea that you can transact more easily and get answers to some of those basic questions without it being as much of a heartache is interesting as well. And then I hope this stuff makes my life easier or better. I don't nothing yet has really saved me lots of time so that, I've got all this time back in my day. Like, the AI tools to record meetings and summarize them are particularly helpful. AI tools to build workflows and that are efficient, but I don't feel like any of this stuff has made my life any different or better. I don't have another hour to go to the gym or, walk around the park or cook dinner or, I'm a big fisherman and, love to explore all the ponds in the neighborhood and those pieces. But I'm I'm hoping that we'll finally get to the point where it's you've trained for the marathon and you can finally realize some of the dream of some of these pieces. Because we're not there yet. I don't it's not easier yet. You still
Yeah.
need someone to help you figure it out and those bits, and I just hope it gets easier.
If you love the insights on this show, you'll love the insights I share in my book, written for entrepreneurs like you who are building with your exit in mind. Take the next step in your business journey to make your business more scalable and valuable. Head on over to btsherpa.com/book to grab your free digital copy of the Business Transition Handbook. Or you can also click the link in the show notes, btsherpa.com/book.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to think about in what you just said. And one potential lens is for the marketing executives out there or the CEOs who are leading marketing teams and trying to figure out, well, if I implement AI, can I reduce headcount? The other lens of that is if I'm the marketer, is AI going to take my job? And I have an opinion on that. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I don't think AI, I think AI is not going to take away any jobs that anyone wants. This is my opinion there. So, finding a segment or doing those pieces, but, you know, the AI generated content is not connecting with people in a human and an emotional way that the way an individual can do with content. And so I've done those experiments where I've generated content and posted it and where I've written it myself. And I get almost 8 times as many responses or visits for things that I write because people know that that's me in those bits. I mean, I think AI will take again, I think it will take away jobs, things like research of contacts and prospects. So you can evaluate someone's 10K, you can see what they've done on LinkedIn, you can research your marketing automation platform or CRM and have it summarize that. So I think some of those jobs will go away, but the job you really want is how do you connect to someone, understand their need and motivation so that you can then help them with whatever your service or product is. And it takes a human. And I think the other thing that I'm seeing that is sort of, you know, an interesting trend is companies are now getting more interested in people who have been there, done that, have business acumen to help solve those problems, and then they're relying on someone who is more junior to try to apply that knowledge to a tool. So it's an interesting dynamic here. Yeah, I will see how this plays out, but I really, you know, I think it's going to be challenging right now for someone entering the workplace because there's an expectation of understanding tools, understanding business to sort of find that right spot until they've got enough of that background. And I'm talking about in my world, sort of B2B software as a service, professional services in that space.
Absolutely.
So what are your thoughts? Like where do you think it's going?
I think that there are people who fear the reaper. They are out there and they see the doom, right? And they're thinking, Terminator is going to take my job in a bot form. And I think it's more collaborative than that. I think if you, as a marketer, let's just stay on that thread for a second, from a field, what field are we talking about? Let's just say the profession in marketing. If you're a marketer and you're not using AI tools, or you're not understanding how AI can help you in your company or help you in your job,
Yeah.
then I think you could be at risk. So it's not that the AI is going to take over your job. I think it's more like if you're not embracing it, then your job's going to be
Right.
at risk.
I mean, you at least have to understand it, regardless of what direction it goes, because your boss can go and type it in and say, write me a press release about XYZ. Here's the URL of the page. And then it pops something out. And it's like, you should already have that in hand and say, yeah, that's great, but it doesn't talk about our company. It's missing this piece. I was reading a blog post, and I'm remiss to say who it's from, but sort of like, who cares? And a lot of the AI content now is who cares? And you can tell when you read it because it's summarizing something else and it's giving you the 5 points to do this or the 3 most effective ways to do XYZ. And you start to read it in 5 seconds, you realize that's not particularly helpful. It's just summarizing something instead of saying, are you concerned about the fact that not all of the contacts in your database are valid and your sales team may be wasting time calling people who are no longer at that company or no longer at that role? An AI tool is not writing that. A human is. The AI bot would say, are you concerned about your data? We can help. Please schedule 15 minutes. Here's a link to my calendar. And so it's just understanding that, because if AI continues to take off as most of the world thinks, or even if it crashes and burns or translates into something else, if you don't at least understand it, the value people think they're going to get, an actual value, then you're right. You become irrelevant because you're not part of that conversation, regardless of how good you are. I think the other sad thing is terminology. I really hate this. So it's sort of, ABM is just target accounts. digital transformation is just implementing software to make things more efficient. And so the other thing is making sure that you're using the vernacular that's used by your management team or company or those pieces. Even if you perfectly understand it, been there, done that, you have to use those words. And I think that's the other piece, sort of a sort of unsolicited advice is that, if you're at a part in your career where you are, understand your space, understand your industry, make sure you understand the tools and understand the words that are used, because that's where the value is. Even if you know these pieces backward and forward, your organization's not going to value you enough if you can't talk about it in ways that they understand.
That's good advice. That's good advice. I want to learn more about your origin story. And I know you are in Virginia now, but you weren't always in Virginia. So just take me back to the little you and some of those key moments in your story that helped shape where you are today.
I think for me, it's interesting. I'm a first generation American. My dad came from Greece, and so it's neighborhood garden in your backyard. Always being sort of inventive and frugal in those pieces. And I think that my entrepreneur journey started really young with selling vegetables on the corner. So no lemonade stand for me. This is all about tomatoes and corn and all of that. But I learned really quickly about sort of you know what to do and what to pick, and I didn't think about it at the time, but I had my friends drive around in their big wheels and distribute it to the neighbors, and I gave them a percentage of what they sold it for, and it was I didn't think about that as entrepreneurship. I thought about that as fun. Like, it was okay, I've got all of this stuff. I get to hang out with my friends, and we bought way more ice cream and candy in that than any child should ever be allowed to have. Hopefully my parents
It's
never listen to this, but I put some money on the side that wasn't in the jar that went to the bank to get treats. But no, it sort of started there, and then it was sort of being curious after that. I was um, in lots of jobs where I was particularly uncomfortable. Really didn't, it took me a while to understand. I started in finance and then eventually moved over to technology, but I always wanted to have my own business or my own company. I finished grad school and it was called Complete Business Consulting. And so I was a bit naive at that point to think that I had the skills or expertise to advise these businesses. So I was in Denver at the time, like Quest, US West, and I wrote the CEO a note saying, I don't think your team is working particularly well. I built a macro. I can do everyone's job for them and, essentially fire the team. Um, so,
Did you get a deal out of that?
oh no, absolutely not. I was wrong about a month and a half. So
Okay.
the manager of the team met with me and he said, well, I built this macro. I'm just going to requisition. I was doing phone numbers for small businesses. So they wanted like 001, 002, all of that. So I figured out how to build a macro that would pull all of those numbers and then add the names to it. It would take me 15 minutes, where my colleagues, it would take them 2 hours to manually enter each name and find the numbers. And so my boss said, well, you need to do so many a day. And like, that's the expectation of you. So I would do that. And I said, you can go home and do whatever you want. We're going to, pay you the dollars for your role because you met your quota. And, sort of off I went. But no, after I did that, I only had about a month left in my tenure at that organization. That was a career limiting move. Then, then ultimately, it was just, I think the other thing about entrepreneurs, a lot of us get antsy or bored or need to be, stimulated in some way. And so I, what got me to this point is I was thankful to work at Tandberg, so a video conferencing company. Um, I was brought in to originally help with SEO and optimization and get them found for video conferencing and those type of those type of terms. And then that turned into demand gen and then an acquisition by Cisco. And so I think why I'm where I am today is that um, they made me figure out some really complicated things. 7 instances of Salesforce that need to be connected with HubSpot and Marketo and Eloqua, and like, how does all of that play together? And so, that piqued my interest. When that was completed, I wasn't let go as part of those changes. Um, and then I'm like, well, wait a second, I can do this for lots of companies, not just one. And so I'm like, I don't want to move to San Jose. This is getting a bit boring for me. And here I am 11 years later, it's sort of doing that really interesting. How do you figure out how to connect systems and fix things so that companies can predict revenue and know that a lead's getting to a salesperson, and they can either sort out what they have or implement technology to fix it. So it's sort of from the the corner vegetable stand through that. I think I've always wanted that, and this is the longest tenure that I've been intellectually stimulated enough to kind of stick with it.
That's amazing. Yeah, there's so much to do in your field too, and there's always a need. I was going to ask you who the target customer is. You mentioned acquisitions. Do you do a lot of work with integrations for companies that have been acquired?
Yeah, we do a lot of work with companies who have been acquired or the acquiring companies. So we need to combine Salesforce, HubSpot, Marketo instances. The fun part of that is the consulting at the front end and getting everyone to agree to what is the lead source, what are the opportunity stages, like the normalization, and then turning that into how do you translate it to the technology. So we do a lot of work there. We do work with venture capital VC companies. So that if they want to buy someone, they have us come in and say, all right, look at their technology. Do they actually have a process? Do you think they're actually going to grow 30 or 40% per year? And we look at their database and said, well, they haven't talked to 3/4 of their database in a year. It hasn't grown. Half of them are invalid. So unless there's some magic sauce they're not telling you, they're not going to get to that point. And then the rest of it is sort of onboarding, implementation, migration work. So, um, companies have a fantastic number of tools they bought over the years. Some of the worst scenarios, they have over 100 different tools. They don't know they have them. They're spending lots of money. They don't know what they're using. And so we come in and say, great, what is your process? We look at all their tools, and then we can help them figure out which ones they need and which ones they don't need to rationalize it. So again, lots of fun, intricate things to figure out that most people don't want to do or not interested in. But we're not going to come up with a creative campaign that everyone's going to say, wow, this is awesome. But we are going to figure out ICP, target market, you have the right contacts, and is stuff going to where it's supposed to? And then is stuff that you think is working actually broken and need to be fixed?
Those are all big challenges. And if a company is going to go through a transition or has been through a transition, I think everybody can kind of relate to the importance of getting set, especially if there's divergent sales teams or if they've been competitive sales teams, just kind of bringing that all together. So important. That's really cool work. Christopher, if you could go back in time and give yourself some entrepreneurial advice, what would it be?
Start sooner. Um, I think if I had the confidence to try some of these things before I had mastered them, I mean, that's a little bit contrary to what I was saying about, skill set and you've just graduated and some of those bits. But I think I would have tried some more things sooner because I realized that the implication of not getting right or failing or learning is not as bad as what I thought that consequence would be. So why did it take so long for me to form this business? I'd sort of identified the need, had been through some of those cycles. I I just felt like I needed to learn more. I needed to get to a certain point before I could get that. And I think that I would sort of tell myself, be more confident that you can figure things out. You don't have to have some of those answers first. Like if you have the confidence that you can figure it out, sort of the sky's the limit regardless of what it is. And if you don't figure it out in the way you expect it to, then you can figure out it's not working and then figure out the next thing you're trying to do.
You have to have the propensity, right?
Yeah, I really believe that. If you don't have that propensity, you can do it, but it's so much harder. Like I really want to learn how to play a few songs on this guitar, and I can play 7 chords now. I can't put them all together very well, but I'm going to get to the point where I can play some songs.
I know you will. You are
It
determined.
might take me 3 or 4 years to get there, but I'm gonna figure it out. But I'm not gonna be, you're not gonna ever see me on stage performing at a concert, in front of a band or something like that, because I don't have the propensity and I don't have like that burning desire to do it.
If you weren't working so much, how would you be spending your time? Would it be guitar, fishing? You've mentioned your dog named Trout.
It would be outside as much as possible. You find me either fishing or sailing, probably one of those two things, like
I
out at the
love it.
local reservoir, with my dog on the boat, sort of, you know, trying to catch fish or, daydreaming, looking at the sky, or out sailing. I think sailing is fun for me because it's very engaging. You can either be very active and tuning the sails to the wind, or you can just, hey, I'm going to go in this general direction and then, be able to unwind a bit. So yeah, you find me outside, likely fishing or sailing, but if not, just outside. Doesn't matter, in front yard, at local park, wherever.
Yeah, the outside brings you good energy, I can tell. Christopher, thank you so much for coming on the show. I have one last question for you, of course, which is how do people get in touch with you?
I think the easiest way, believe it or not, is LinkedIn. Um, I'm going to do something crazy and leave my phone number. So use the word asparagus. So it's sort of an internal joke for the company. When someone gets distracted, we all have knitted asparagus, but you can actually call me directly if you have questions of those pieces. I'm always happy to talk, but please reference asparagus so I know you're not trying to sell me something. But my direct line is 571-606-3106. You can always look me up at Find Your Yeti or measuredresults.com. We're rebranding, to get to our website and reach out to us that way.
Awesome. Awesome. Christopher, thank you so much for coming on the Entrepreneur Gene. It's been great to have this conversation with you today.
Thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to questions and thoughts and feedback. And do people think this is right or not, or accurate, or do they think this is a bit off? I'd love to continue the conversation and see what type of engagement we can get.
Absolutely. And so for everybody, thank you so much for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow the show, not only in your favorite podcast player, but also find our channel on YouTube, the Business Transition Sherpa channel. This has been another amazing, fun, exciting episode of the Entrepreneur Gene. And thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be with you next time.
Hey, that's a wrap. This show is sponsored by the Business Transition Sherpa, working with entrepreneurs who want to escape feeling like a prisoner in their own business and to eventually let go flawlessly. If you loved today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And if you want to help support the Entrepreneur Gene, I'd encourage you to leave a rating and review. Ratings and reviews truly help our show grow and get in front of more entrepreneurs just like you. If you do leave a rating and review, we'll be so happy. Take a screenshot of it, send it to my email, Laurie@btsherpa.com, and we'll send you a free digital copy of my book, The Business Transition Handbook. And we'll also enter you to win one of our monthly swag boxes. For show notes, including links to everything in today's episode, be sure to visit btsherpa.com. Also, as a reminder, you can watch this full video interview on our YouTube channel for the Business Transition Sherpa. While you're there, be sure to check out videos from our award-winning podcast called Succession Stories. We'll see you next time on The Entrepreneur Gene.